I remember going into museums when I was a kid and I would see like minimalism, and it never did anything for me because I didn't see it as being hugely different than the wall next to it. My work is maximalism. I mean, it's like the exact opposite. I always love coming back to pieces by other artists that contain so much detail that every time you look at it, it sort of recaptures your imagination and you see something that you perhaps hadn't seen before. And I hope that my work does that too. I think in general I'm just drawn to detail. I've sent pieces off to gallery shows and got them back again and just kept working on them. So, you know, that might be a sickness. I don't know. I was an illustration major, and after graduation I became a freelance illustrator. I worked with a pretty good cross-section of all the major magazines: Better Homes and Gardens, U.S. News and World Report, Newsweek, you know, pretty much all the major magazines, because I've been doing this close to 20 years now. A lot of it is, at this point in time, in terms of the illustration work, is pretty much straight painting, as opposed to my personal work, which is heavily collage-based. I've only done one collage piece for a magazine client, and that was for Smithsonian last year. Typically, magazine clients don't have that kind of time to give you. Like an 8x10 piece would take me like a month to do. But Smithsonian wasn't very big. It was about 4x5 inches, and they gave me plenty of time, and I think the overall result turned out great. As far as my personal work goes, you know, I can do anything I want to do. This is a big sort of 40x60 inch piece that I started a while back. It basically starts where I'm just painting in like big blocks of color to give a lot of color to the piece, but then to also start building the collage into the background color. I think actually the most fun is the fact that I have to like go on a scavenger hunt to find all this stuff. These are like old Valentine's Day cards. These are both old pieces of packaging. This is like an old tobacco card. As many different sorts of things as I can possibly get into the piece without kind of repeating anything. And actually, now that I'm sort of filling in some of these gaps, the pieces will tend to become smaller and smaller as I go along. To sit down with an X-Acto knife and cut out each individual little piece, that takes a pretty long time to do in order to build up a wealth of material. It can take me days sometimes just to fill one of these things enough so that I have enough material in order to start gluing. There is sort of like a filling process with this type of work where you have to get to a certain point and bring the elements close enough together where there can then be like relationships that you can play with. More of like a conversation going on in terms of the way that the different elements are communicating with one another. Actually, the work, even though I refer to it as collage for lack of a better term, it's actually pretty much 50% collage and 50% painting. Even though it started as straight up collage pieces, I've actually branched out and started doing the collage as actual characters that are moving through a landscape and interacting with characters that I've actually hand painted. The straight up painted characters are characters that have a lot of nature related stuff going on, where the collage characters are supposed to be indicative of humankind sort of spilling all this stuff all over the nature. So there is a definite man-nature duality to the newer work that I'm excited about. I like all the parts of the process of doing the collage. Sometimes I get impatient because it takes so long, but I have to remind myself that it's a marathon and not a sprint, and I have to just come in like every day to the studio and take one day at a time and do as much as I can. I really don't know how to define what I do. I've heard it defined in a lot of different ways, like pop surrealism, or at one point I think all the artists who are doing work in a sort of similar vein to what I'm doing were referred to as lowbrow, which nobody seemed to like. I tend to leave that to other people because I have like 80,000 little pieces to glue, so I don't have the time to try and figure out what the work is.
Minnesota Original is made possible by the State Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund and the citizens of Minnesota.